Now that I am joined by my guest, who is an economic analyst, Dr. Aliyu Ilias. Thank you, Doctor, for joining us on Business Daily.
Thank you for having me.
Doctor, you have heard, the comments from most Nigerians talking about the economic stabilization plan. This is not the first time we have seen, such a plan being implemented. We have seen the economic, revitalization plan and some other plans that have come up in the past. But let us hear from you now. What are your, recommended priority areas?
Right. I think first and foremost, the first one we should look into is energy security. Because if there's energy security, a lot of things will come easy, transportation, and the second one should be MSME. Simply because MSME employ over 85% of Nigeria. So by engaging or prioritizing MSME simply means you are also creating jobs. And the last one is agriculture. You recall President Wale Tinubu declared emergency on food security, and we still expect to see the outcome of that. So these are the three major areas I would recommend that if we prioritize this area, it definitely bring development in our country, Nigeria.
Dr. Aliyu Ilias, they're talking about prioritizing security, agriculture, and MSME growth. But let's go on a short break. When we return, we shall look at specific areas that we do expect, to be a part of the economic stabilization plan that we do expect to be released by the Federal Ministry of Finance and Economic Recovery. So do stay. And you're still watching Business Daily, coming to you live on Trust TV. And just before the break, we started a conversation on the fact that the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, over the weekend came out to say that that the federal government is preparing an economic stabilization plan, which is designed to address food inflation, stimulate investment, foster economic growth, and create jobs in the country. My guest, who is an economic analyst, Dr. Aliyu Ilias, is right here with us. Thank you, Doctor, for coming on the program again.
Thank you for having me.
Doctor, I would like for you to, speak to the feasibility of this plan. Just before the break, we were talking about how we have seen, quite a number of plans in the past. And we talked about the economic plan we saw recently and the economic ERGP, that is the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan that we saw, barely some years ago. So speaking about yet another plan, which is the Economic Stabilization Plan, what should be done differently in the sense that this one, actually does tackle the areas that it is expected to tackle?
Right. I think before now we've been calling for this because as a government, there's need to have a short-term plan, medium plan, and long-term plan, economic plan, because it's quite open. If you look at their blueprints, and for 1 year there is no plan, economic plan for Nigeria. So I think it's a good one that they are coming up with such a economic plan. However, coming up with an economic plan is not the problem, is the operationalization of that economic plan. How is it going to reflect? And if you're also planning, we always expect people to take along the state and the local government, because I always go back to Obasanjo. There is what we call need, seed, and lead. It takes from the national, state, and local government, and that brings about a lot of things. So, and if you are also bringing that, you must prioritize the right thing. That's another thing, because Nigeria is in a quagmire and economic problem now. So there is need for you to have a sustainable plan that will resonate not only with the government, it must also resonate with the private sector.
You talked about how it's not okay, rather, to have, the perfect plan, because one thing Nigeria does have is the right documentation.
Right.
But when it comes to, implementing or operationalizing, we don't see so much, play out. But I will like for us to speak about specific areas, because the minister was quite clear when he said that this is expected to address food inflation, stimulate investment, foster economic growth, and create jobs. So I'd like for us to start off with inflation. What specific measures would you recommend, to ensure that the long-term food security and, stability in food prices actually does last. I mean, food inflation currently stands at about 40% as I speak. So what would be, the recommendations that you, as someone who pays close attention to, the economic space in Nigeria, would be recommending towards tackling food inflation and inflation as a whole?
Right. When you look at inflation, our inflation in Nigeria is quite structural. So it's a function of something. Something is happening. That's why we have continuous inflation. But I must also emphasize that our major problem is energy security. Now,
energy security,
because that inflation is a function of something. Something brought about inflation. So the first thing is security. The second one is energy security. So when we say security, you know that food generally is being produced, is being worked on by farmers. How many farmers have that confidence to go into the farm to actually work? You could see people from Benue, from Bauchi, from Kano, Kaduna. People cannot access their farmland, even in the southwest. So it becomes a process, and that's why I say it's a structural problem. So there must be adequate security for people to have that confidence to go into their farm. That's one. Number two, energy security. I can tell you, it is not enough to produce food. It is enough to also have access to transport that food to where it's supposed to be. So if you produce food in Bauchi, for instance, or in Kaduna, you need to take that food to Lagos. Do you know that the cost of the transportation is the problem? The problem is not the food, the produce itself. The problem is a 40-feet container from Kaduna or to Lagos, it may cost about 20 million. So who are they going to transfer that thing to? They have to transfer it to the consumer. And that's why the CNG that we are talking about must come to stay, not rhetorics, not only displaying of it. Because if a keke man was analyzing for me that if he is buying fuel for a day, he's going to expend 13,000 naira to buy fuel, to really do his businesses before he will now deliver, before he will now take his own profit. But if it is CNG, it will cost him only 3,000 naira. Look at the gap of 10,000, and that's for keke man. Look at Okada man. Look at the transport man. Look at bus that will contain people. So first thing we should look at is energy security. Now you have increased remove the fuel subsidy. It has made a lot of things go, very, very expensive. So for me, energy security should be prioritized. Because it resonates with a manufacturing sector, a farmer, a businessman, a household person. That's what is actually taking away everything. For you to move from your point of work to another place, to your home, how much actually go. It has even go beyond your salary. So let's look at an average civil servant who earns 30,000 naira. Can Nigeria of today, can you work anywhere in Abuja and 30,000 naira is enough for your transport in a month? The answer is no. So energy security should be prioritized.
Dr. From all you've said, one thing you have pointed towards is, problems around supply chain distribution and logistics as well. And that also brings to mind that this inflation just might be a cost push inflation. Do you agree with that, saying it's a cost push inflation?
When you say cost push inflation, yes, it's more of cost push inflation, because if you look at the supply chain you mentioned, what is even supply chain? It's a network between the point of manufacturing to the point of consumption. So what happened between that point of manufacturing to point of consumption is a problem. So manufacturers don't have issue producing, but manufacturers have issue distributing. Manufacturers have issue taking it to the doormat of the consumers, and it has to transfer that price. So supply chain needs to be prioritized. We need to look at that. Even President himself made mention that is declared state of emergency on food security. So if you have declared state of emergency on food security for the past 10 months, now has it reflect? Because it's supposed to reflect, because there must have been dry season farming, there must be irrigation, and cost of food would have reduced. But I can tell you, if at all we have produce here now, transportation is a problem. So for supply chain to be very, very adequate, there must be also a very, very fast approach to make sure that CNG is available everywhere, because it has come to stay. So, but it must be available, and that's why we also encourage federal government, please encourage private sector to come into it. Because if you are doing this, you are too slow. I wouldn't want to say this government is too slow in terms of implementation. In terms of removal of first subsidy, it was with the first sweep pronouncement. First subsidy is what? Gone. That pronouncement was a fiscal policy pronouncement. But the solution that will cushion the effect 1 year up till now, we don't have that cushion to resolve to be the absorber. of this challenge. So government must prioritize energy security.
Indeed, Doctor. And one other area that came up repeatedly on a social media poll, and you also did mention, was, MSME development, that is micro, small and medium enterprise development. And like we all know, they are like the backbone of the Nigerian economy, over 40 million MSMEs as we currently speak. But let us speak to, successful interventions that we should expect should come, towards developing the MSME space. I say this because as we speak, monetary policy rate currently standing quite high, depriving MSMEs the opportunity of approaching their banks for loans, and a lot of other policies that have not been the favorable towards, MSME development. But let's hear from you, Doctor. When this plan is eventually released, what sort of intervention should, the federal government or the minister himself now, speaking of the person of Wale Edun, what sort of intervention should he prioritize towards growing the Nigerian MSME space? Right.
If you look at the MSME, they contributed over 50% to our GDP, and they employ over 85% of Nigeria. Because when you talk about agriculture, most people in agriculture still fall into that curve of MSME because they are still doing subsistence farming. So that's where they are. And if you talk about job creation, it's only MSME that can create job. You know why? Government does not, all the civil servants in Nigeria, both states, federal government and local government, they are not up to 10 million. So, and we have about a workforce of 150 million. So it is this MSM. So government need to create enabling environment. And what is this enabling environment? Access to capital. In any climate, if you don't have access to capital, it becomes a problem. Because this capital that we use to do business, I recall during the use of doing business, we also told them then that somebody NYC certificate, it is enough to borrow money. Because if I need 1 million naira to do business, and you are asking me to go and bring a house, a land paper, someone that is struggling, how can I afford that? But if you can say, well, my NYC discharge certificate, I can bring it, or I should tell my king or my magaji, my environment, to come and stand for me so that you can give me a loan of 1 million naira, that would be fine. Because by the time you give me a loan of 1 million naira, indirectly I may be employing 4 or 5 people. What am I doing? I'm creating jobs. So I think there must be access to fund for this MSME. Because there is no access, if this regular commercial banks, we are in deep challenge to develop our MSME. And I can also tell you, government policy are also killing taxation. Because if you look at because we are waiting for them to unveil the tax policy, template rather. Because if I am earning 1 million naira and I'm trading off a lot of money through taxation, where local government will collect it to, state will collect, federal government will collect, as an MSME, I would rather go do other business or I'll be looking for jobs.
Multiple taxation.
Also inflation is also a problem. Because if I am also doing business and inflation is taking away everything from me, it's a problem. So we must look at issue of access to fund. We must look at review the tax policy that will favor the MSME. We must also finally give access to the market. It's not enough for me to have business. I must also have access to market. Very key.
Doctor, you said something that stuck out for me, and that is the fact that, inflation. You talked about how we have seen different measures towards, inflation tightening measures come from, not just the fiscal side now, but also the monetary side of government. But it seems as though the tightening measures that we have seen so far are stifling access to credit, access to finance for, MSMEs. But the question now is, how can, the federal government, what systems or what strategies can be employed to ensure that we can balance the dual objective of, tightening inflation and, on the other hand, still growing the economy? We talked about, MSMEs that are a major stay of the Nigerian economy. So how can we balance both moving forward?
The present Cardoso approach, which is much more hawkish, is trying to sacrifice growth so as to make sure inflation comes down. It's going to be counterproductive. It is already, because since he has engaged in increasing NPR since he assumed office, you have seen that it has not really reduced inflation. So I think he has to look at it very well. Increasing the NPR would never solve the problem, because it will only discourage MSME. I can tell you, a lot of people that are doing in MSME are out of business. You know why? Instead of me to go and borrow money that I'll be paying 30% interest rate on, it's not better I also take that money to go and keep me in the bank and collect the interest. myself. So people prefer to go and keep their money, get interest on it, rather than investing that money and lose the profit and even the major money therein because of inflation. Because people purchasing power is even poor. Who will buy from you? So that's the problem. That's why most manufacturers are telling you that they are even having unsold. They cannot produce because people are not even buying from them. So there's something double problem. They cannot borrow from bank because of the exorbitant tax. They are also producing, not seeing people to buy. Do you see the problem? And that's why most of them are dying. And that's why we see most of international and also, moving out. You are only encouraging portfolio investors, which doesn't have anything physical. And if you don't have anything physical, there will not be employment for people.
Doctor, you have re-emphasized the need for, access to market. And one thing that crossed my mind is the African Free Trade Continental Agreement. That agreement was ratified by Nigeria over 4 years or even more, about 4 to 5 years ago, and not so much has been done with regards to that agreement, despite the major importance that can have, an impact on the Nigerian trade space. What are your thoughts on, AFTA and other trade policies that we have seen in recent times?
Right. I think Nigeria focuses more on monetary policy, fiscal policy, and we are not focusing on trade policy. And trade policy it's a very key thing. You see, AFCTA is going to shortchange Nigerians in the long run.
Shortchange Nigerians?
In the long run. Why? Nigerians does not have industrial tendency. When you are not industrialized, you are opening up the market. I can tell you, I've canvassed in different fora that if you are to accept AFCTA agreement, please itemize product that should never come to Nigeria. You know why? If you allow the market and you allow free entry to a market, an urban man who is producing shoe, who lack the appropriate infrastructure, cannot compete with someone in Ghana who is producing shoe. It's not possible. You know why? In Ghana, there is stable electricity. In Ghana, there is infrastructure. You produce at less amount. But in Nigeria, there is no electricity. You don't have incentive. So if he's selling a pair of shoe at 5,000, you'll be selling your pair of shoe at 20,000. So which one are you going to prioritize? Also, in our textile industry, you should tell no Ankara should come into Nigeria again. Let us produce and wear Ankara in Nigeria. If you allow Cote d'Ivoire to bring in the Ankara at that small and cheap price, who will buy Nigerian? So that's why this AFCTA agreement, Nigeria should list items that should not cross our border. If not, industry will die. Our development will be slow and will suffer a lot of things. So it's good. Go and check South Africa. Up till now, they're still dragging. They've not approved this CFTA. I'm telling you.
But on the good side now, we have seen, some other countries, for instance, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, embrace it. And this has, increased growth.
It will help them. You know why?
Bilateral trade between those countries.
Let me shock you again. What is the population of those countries? You have 200 million people in Nigeria. I was in Rwanda. Do you know in Rwanda, they are producing Volkswagen? Can I shock you again? We only have 13 million people in Rwanda. And I can tell you, among that 13 people, 1% cannot afford new car in Rwanda. But in Nigeria, here we have 200 million. I can tell you 5% of Nigerian come up. So who are they producing for? It's for Nigerians.
So in essence, you're saying Nigeria does have the market.
The market, the population, the finance, the population. In South Africa, they only have 5 brands of car. And if you are to bring that car to their country, you must come and assemble it in their country. During they create job, they bring in more GDP. So in Nigeria today, please take your time today, count how many brand of car. I can tell you, I've counted before. I counted 38 brand of car that comes into Nigeria. We buy everything possible. How will that bring development to Nigeria?
Well, Doctor, quickly, because our time is far gone, we want to hear from you policy recommendations towards this trade area you have spoken specifically about.
Thank you. First thing Nigerians should do is that itemize item that you are allowed to come into the country. Itemize some that should never come so that we can grow. Right, that's number one. Number two, please condition these people that are bringing cars to Nigeria. They should come and assemble the car in Nigeria, or they shouldn't bring their car to Nigeria. How can you bring a brand new car to a country like Nigeria? Let me give you a good example. Our National Assembly member has, they are about 400 together, right? 109 and 360, right? So imagine if that car was assembled in Nigeria. They didn't assemble it, they bring it fixed and they ship it in. Look at the cost of shipping, look at the advantage that would have been there if it is fixed. Look at job creation. So for me, I think we must prioritize our policy. Why don't you tell them that come and bring it in compartments, come and fix it? If you cannot manufacture here, we will agree. Maybe say we don't have infrastructure. Come and assemble it in Nigeria, and there will be at least value added in our country.
But Doctor, quickly, doesn't that beat the essence of the African Free Trade Continental Agreement? Less talking about removal of tariffs, making it less burdensome for traders across nations.
Even America. If you remember, Trump said American first. America used to have what we call American spec. American spec is produced in Japan. America now said, no, come and produce in my country. So we must have priority. We must prioritize our people, our country, and bring development here. If we don't prioritize, it will be finished somewhere. They will come and serve you here. So what is your advantage? They are taking the advantage to their country.
Well said, Doctor. I have been speaking with Dr. Aliyu Ilias, who is an economic analyst, speaking extensively towards the proposed economic stabilization plan by the Minister of Finance and coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun. Thank you again, Doctor, for all the insight on today's edition of the program.
Thank you for having me.
This is where we draw the curtains on today's edition of Business Daily. In the meantime, join the conversation on social media and let us hear your thoughts. What are your thoughts on the proposed economic stabilization plan, and what priority areas are you proposing should be, given special attention moving forward? My name is Chiamaka Enendu. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.